You're listening to Passions and Prologues, a literary podcast where each week I'll interview an author about a thing they love and how it inspires their work. My name's Adam Sokol, and if this is your first time tuning in, thanks so much for joining. If you've been here for the past couple weeks, so glad to have you back. Really just overjoyed about today's episode. Today is what I will call the first of a two-part episode, really. Today's interview is with Kimberly Jones. Next week's episode is going to be with Gilly Segal. They are writing partners. And before I get into a book recommendation for this week and what Kim and I talk about, first, just a short story for you guys. So, as many of you may know, I used to work at a company where part of my job was interviewing authors there. And several years ago at a library conference, I sat down with two authors named Kimberly Jones and Gilly Segal. They had written a book, a young adult book called I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. And I remember reading it before I met them and just being blown away by this book. And we talk about the book a little bit in our conversation with Kim, so I'm not going to get into it now, but I just remember going to my director's office and saying, this is going to be a New York Times bestseller. And I talk about how I did that a few other times in my history at that company during the interview. And it took a little while, but I ended up being right. It's a New York Times bestseller. But I remember reading I'm Not Dying With You Tonight and being like, wow, I can't believe two people wrote this. It's incredible. And then I sat down with Kim and Gilly, authors of this very serious book about two teenage girls, one white, one black, surviving kind of a race riot, really. And I remember sitting down with these, Kim is African-American, Gilly is white. And I just remember sitting down with them and being like, okay, this is going to be a very serious conversation. And they were the goofiest, silliest, funniest people I've ever come across. And since that time, I have gotten to know them so well to the point where Kim and Gilly both have jokingly talked about being like extended members of my family, like with the rest of my siblings. And it's just so much joy. I truly love these two people so much. I've gotten to hang out with them in Atlanta for a book event, and we've done tons of virtual events and all sorts of stuff. I appreciate these two humans so much. And so Kim and I today talk about, she has a bunch of random collections of things. And I almost don't want to tell you, I'm not even going to tell you the things that we talk about. One of them is books. That's not a crazy thing, but everything else I'm going to let her tell you all about, and you'll hear in real time as it happens. But she is a collector of things. And what's happening, I'm noticing with every one of these episodes, is each episode starts out about what a thing this author is passionate about. And then there's becoming these secondary conversations. With Brad Meltzer, it was about nostalgia. With Mallory O'Meara, it was about body positivity. And with Kim, what I'm realizing and what I realized as I was editing this episode is Kim, these collections that she has is about the different characters and the different versions of herself that she sees in her mind and that she ends up writing about and writing as. And it's a really interesting conversation about legacy and how she's collecting these things to leave behind for her family, and how, we think of our great-grandparents and our great-great-grandparents as our ancestors, and how one day she's going to be those ancestors for someone else. It's a really great conversation, and I can't wait for you to listen to it. And then next week, Gilly and I would sit down, and I'll wait until next week to tell you what that's all about. But I adore them both. I couldn't possibly just interview one of them, and I couldn't interview them together because they have very different interests that we talk about. So two different episodes, and you're going to love both of them equally, I guarantee it. Kim, in addition to writing with Gilly, they both also write their own books. And Kim had a book that came out at the beginning of 2022 called How We Can Win, which was based off of this incredibly viral video that she did with the same title, this incredibly powerful speech that went mega viral all over the world. And she ended up being on The Daily Show, and it was talked about by John Oliver as well. And just she was all over the place. How We Can Win is this extremely impactful book about the impacts of systemic racism and how in her formative years in Chicago, she became a lifelong devotee to justice and all this incredible stuff. And so along those lines, if you haven't read How We Can Win by Kim yet, definitely do that. I will put a link in the show notes for you to get it. But there's another book that I also think is extremely important that came out at the beginning of 2021 called 400 Souls, A Community History of African America. And it's from 1619 to 2019. It was edited by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi and Dr. Keisha Blaine, excuse me. And it is a series of stories that is written by different African American authors. And each story takes, I believe, a decade in time from 1619 to 2019. And they tell a different story of African American history. It's extremely important. It's extremely powerful. Won a whole bunch of awards. And I highly, highly recommend you check out 400 Souls. So, okay. Just wanted to put that out there. Thank you to everyone who continues to send me wonderful feedback across social media and through email. As a reminder, you can email me any reviews you leave on Apple or anywhere else. Just screenshot it and I will send you some customized book recommendations. Or if you just want to follow me on Instagram and TikTok, you can find me at Passions and Prologues. And again, the email is passionsandprologues@gmail.com. Okay, that's everything. Thanks for sticking with me for a little bit of a longer intro. I just wanted to give you that brief short story of my origin story of meeting Kim and Gilly, two people who I sincerely and truly love as human beings. So, okay, let's get into my conversation with Kimberly Jones on Passions and Prologues. Kim, what we're talking about collecting today? That's super broad. So just like what type of collections do you have? What is it about collecting? Let's just get into it. Like, what is it about collecting that you love?
I love it so much. Okay, so when I was a mini Kim, running around my parents' house causing drama, and being awful as younger siblings are, because I'm the baby of my siblings. So I made it my life to make everyone's life interesting. I always loved I grew up loving my older siblings' stuff. Mm-hmm. Like they always had like things that seem retro to me, right? Because I'm like 7 and they're 17. I hadn't lived in life a lot. So things that were like 5 or 6 years old felt retro to me. Right. And I just always loved their stuff. Like, that's why I was so annoying to them, is like, I always wanted their things. I'm like, yeah, this Barbie is cool, whatever. But like my brother has Rock'em Sock'em robots that they don't even like make anymore. And I want to play with that. I want the old stuff. And so as a young kid, I just really fell in love with old things. So I had one of the things at the ready that I have, one of my favorites. I should not have blurred my background.
No, you're good. It's okay.
So do you remember the show on MTV, MTV Raps?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of people don't know this, but MTV Raps made collector's cards.
Yeah.
Of all the people who had been on their show.
Yeah.
And I started collecting them. And just like any other collection, they came in like a little pack of 5 with a strip of bubble gum that was hard as a brick and almost broke your teeth. I had collected them. I keep them in this box. I really need to find like someplace else to put them, but I have all of them. I am not missing one. And I have had these since I started collecting them when I was maybe about 10 or something around there. And I collected them all the way through to when I was 19 when the show ended. And I have every single one of them. I'll show you one if it doesn't get like caught up in the blur. And they are in mint condition. Like they are great shape. Like here is Dr. Dre and Ed Lover, who hosted the show. Oh my God, there's so many good ones. Here's Digital Underground, and this one has a young Tupac in it, because remember, he was in that band.
Amazing.
It's just like, I have all these cards. Here's a young KRS-One, the entirety of the MTV Raps collectibles, but I also have 5 mint condition Cabbage Patch dolls, and one of my Cabbage Patch dolls. So my parents worked for Sears, right? And my mom worked at the Sears Tower, and my dad was the supervisor of one of the Sears warehouses. So the first set of Cabbage Patch dolls that came in like 1983 or something like that, my dad took the first one off the line and bought it because they could, back then at Sears, they could buy Sears products like at cost.
Yeah.
Like if you worked for the company. My dad took the first one off the line, bought it, and I still have it.
That's amazing. So for like these the stuff that you're collecting, I know you have other stuff you collect as well.
I have so much stuff.
So when you started collecting it, like with the MTV Raps cards, like, is it a need to be a completionist? Is it just like kind of the novelty of having something that is like like I have a friend who he loves really good whiskey, but like it's almost like he loves the chase for finding a good bottle of whiskey almost more than like enjoying it. Like, is it the hunt for you? Like, what is it about collecting that kind of intrigues you so much?
You know, for me, it's very specific to like my personal aesthetics. Mm-hmm. So it's not even things like, it's funny. I don't even know if the things that I have other people would want. I don't even know if other people want this, my treasure trove of junk. But it's really like, I am your typical Pisces. I'm a very sentimental person. I'm a very emotional person. I'm a crybaby. Mm-hmm. I get like overwhelmed with emotion about sentimental things. And like all of these things that I have a special place in my heart for some moment in time. Yeah. Like growing up, I loved hip hop and I was there, you know, I'm very, you know, I'm one of those people that don't care about my age. I'm 46 years old. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, you know, during the golden era of hip hop. Mm-hmm. And it was the soundtrack to my life. And Yo MTV Raps, there were two shows, Yo MTV Raps and The Basement, were basically like my go-to. Yeah. You know, it was the Instagram of the day, you know, it's really kept up with everything. And so for me, like the Yo MTV Raps cards, I hold onto those so tightly because it reminds me of a very fun period in my life. It reminds me of my middle school years and my high school years and even my late elementary years. And like, I thought I wanted to be a rapper. Mm-hmm. And so like I've been thinking about writing a middle grade book about this. I haven't decided yet. I've been thinking about writing a middle grade book and I'm about to take you back, Adam. I know you're a little younger than me, but I'm about to take you back. Remember the era of the talent show?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We had talent shows. Yeah.
Right. See, I don't know if I don't think kids have talent shows.
I don't know I'm guessing they might still, but like, yeah, ours was like, I went to a really small, I graduated with like 48 kids in my class. So I had a tiny high school, but we absolutely had talent shows. Like I remember somebody did, oh man, I'm going to call him out. I hope he listens to this. My brother and his best friend did speaking of hip hop, they did Jump by Crisscross. And they lip sync the whole thing. That was their like talent. They did not win. Anyway, I'm sorry, Jay, if you're listening. Put me on blast.
Exactly. So there was something about that era of the talent show that was so much fun that allowed kids to express themselves. And to your point, you didn't necessarily have to be that talented to be in a talent show, right? Yeah. You just got up there, you had fun, your friends cheered you on, and gave your mom and dad somewhere to go and watch their kids like bounce around on the stage, play the flute poorly, or like lip sync to Crisscross or whatever it was that you were doing. And so it's like, it's funny that's perfect that you brought that up because that's what it was. I was the lip sync queen. I like did everybody from like Run DMC to the Beastie Boys to like Queen Latifah, MC Light, like all these people. I was always in the talent show. I was always lip syncing until I got to like middle school and thought that I could write my own raps. And I had a bunch of friends who I convinced to be in a rap group with me.
Incredible.
And none of them could rap. So I had a notebook where I wrote everyone's raps. I wrote everyone's raps, and then we would perform. We had my mom was like the best manager, stage mom ever. She went and got the big packs of like iron-on letters, and she ironed on a bunch of t-shirts with our like rap names on the back and like all this stuff on the front. And so like things like this like take me back to that time. Yeah. It's very warm and fuzzy for me. And even like, especially like now that my parents are passed away, like having those dolls that my dad bought me over, because I have all the Cabbage Patch dolls that my dad bought me over the years. Yeah. Even like Cabbage Patch used to make these dolls called the Cabbage Animals or something like that. It was called, but it was like cats and dogs and stuff. And they have like these weird bodies, look like they're like something, a weird horror movie. But I even had those. And so it makes me think about my dad. Yeah. All that. So all the junk that I have is like super sentimental to me. But I will say this. I do understand their rarity, because for some reason, the things that I do love that are nostalgic to me, I'm like looking on eBay and all these places, and they have price value because they meant something to me. They mean something to someone else.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about like remembering a moment in time from this type of thing. Because I remember, so we had an uncle, my uncle Mylan, who passed away, I think like a year and a half ago at this point, but he lived in Detroit, and he had partial custody of my cousin Caitlin. And basically what he would do is he would come here every other weekend. He would come back to Lorraine, where we live, and he would pick up Caitlin, and they would stay with us on the weekends. And so she was like our little sister, and they were there, and it was amazing. And he was a general manager of a couple of McDonald's. And so he would bring the McDonald's toys and like glasses back when like they would do, and they may still, I don't look at kids' toys stuff anymore, but like they would do the partnerships with movies, and like, so we had the full collection of the Flintstones glasses. They're like, they literally look like you'd get them at like Bedrock, and there were small glasses. I don't know why I'm using my hands. It's not a podcast, but like they were like small drinking glasses, and there were those, and there was like 5 of them. And then there was also it was Batman. It was either Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. One of the two. It was with the Riddler, when Jim Carrey played the Riddler. Same thing, like they had these real slick looking kids drinking glasses. And we would also like get the toys. Like he brought us the speaking of the 80s, they were like these transformers that were like, they transformed from like a thing of French fries into like an actual transformer. We had all of those. Like my mom and dad might still have one of the Flintstones glasses, because like they were like solid glass. Like,
yeah.
And like, I'm sure if I looked on eBay, they're probably worth money. But like exactly what you said, like I would go over to my parents' house even as recently as like a couple years ago, and I would drink out of those, and I would think of my Uncle Mylan, because I was like, it's a moment in time.
Yeah.
And it's like, but those, I mean, that was kind of the only thing that I wouldn't even say we collected, more so that like my uncle just brought them, and my mom was probably like, great, more stuff to put in our house. But we love them, and like I said, we use those glasses forever. But like, were there, you told me before we started recording, actually, like last week, you have other stuff that you also collect. So we've got the cards, we got the Cabbage Patch dolls. What else is Kim Jones collecting?
Well, I mean, obvi books, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I have a boat ton of signed books. But again, it's funny. I'm thinking, and thinking about what you just said about like, it wasn't even like you set out to collect these things. Right. You just have them. I think with a lot of my stuff in the beginning, like now I'm more like conscious. I'm like following the Sotheby's Instagram page and stuff like that. But like a lot of this stuff just started being like really just stuff that I like just loved, and then I never let go of it. And it's funny because like between me and my siblings, like I'm not even the pack rat. Like my sister Gigi is definitely the pack rat. Like she has like her 3rd grade report card or whatever.
Incredible.
I am the person who likes a really, really clean aesthetic, and like I'm constantly like throwing stuff out. But it would be just these few things that I'm like, no, I have to keep my MTV Raps cards and my Cabbage Patch dolls and this thing and that thing. And so a lot of it is just love. And so it's the same way with books, right? I just love books. I'm a reader. I'm a writer. I was a bookseller for a very long time, camp counselor, all these spaces in which, books were just like part of my life. And so even in just being a bookseller, like the amount of people who just come to the bookstore to do a signing, and it's like here to do a signing, and like, I'm going to get it. And so, for example, like one of my favorite books in my book collection is Norton Juster came for the 50th anniversary of Phantom Tollbooth, Little Shop of Stories, when I was managing the store. And they had made this special 50th anniversary special edition copy of the Phantom Tollbooth. And Norton Juster was making one stop. He was just coming to Little Shop.
That's amazing.
And that was it. So there's not a lot of signed copies of this 50th anniversary edition. And it's annotated, and it's like this amazing edition of Phantom Tollbooth. And I have it signed from Norton Juster. But one of my favorite signed books, and books is where I'm now like really like intentional about collecting. Yeah. Like I follow book sites. If there's a legendary author coming to town, I will hunt down via all of the book websites a first edition, first printing of one of their more legendary books and buy that and have it so that I can get it signed when they get in town, that kind of thing. That's where I'm the most intentional is with books. But one of my favorites was again, it was gifted to me about a few years ago. Gilly and I did Illinois has their Anderson's YA conference. And Gilly and I did the Anderson's YA conference. While we were there, we did this panel. And we were promoting at the time, I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. And we did this panel, and this teacher from Ferguson, Missouri, stood up. Older white man. He was the chorus teacher at that school. And he stood up and he said, I don't teach English. I don't teach anything. I'm the chorus teacher. But my kids, I could see a loss of light in my kids after the riots in Ferguson because they lasted so long. And our community was so affected in a way that I don't think people outside of our community realizes. And he said, I started a book club. I had never, done a book club with my chorus kids or whatever. He said, I started a book club. And what we read was I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, which, of course, if people have not read it, is the story of two young women, one Black and one white, who survived the night riots and civil unrest. And so he said, my kids had never had a space to process. They had been in middle school or elementary school when Ferguson happened. And now he was teaching at high school. And he said they had no way to process what they had lived through. And nobody was asking them how it affected them or what it was like to try to get home from school that first night in the midst of civil unrest. And he said, so we read I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. And he said, and for the first time, via the words on your pages, my kids got an opportunity to process. And so he stood up and said that at the panel. And of course, Gilly and I are bawling.
Sobbing, yeah.
The rest of the panel is sobbing. The whole audience is sobbing. And so later that night, we were going to dinner. We were at the hotel and we're standing in the lobby, and he came down and he saw me and he said, I'm leaving in the morning, but I'm so glad that I caught you. Are you on your way out? And I'm like, yeah, we're just on our way out to dinner, but we'll be back. And he goes, well, I'm leaving in the morning. So, hey, if you could hang on for a second, I have something for you. I want to run upstairs and go grab it. And I was like, sure. And earlier that day, the conference had this amazing auction. I mean, I'm talking like auctioning like first print, first edition copies of like Harry Potter books, like this epic auction of books. And at the time, Gilly and I were new authors. These books were not in our price range.
Right.
We didn't even go look. We were like, we'll let Rick Riordan, he's here. Let him go. And so he comes back downstairs. And he said, me and the other teachers from Ferguson got together at the auction and we bought this for you. And I was like, again, uncontrollable sobbing, bunch of other authors around me. They're crying. He's crying. We're all crying. It was a signed first edition, first printing of Tar Baby.
Are you kidding me? That's incredible. Oh, my God. How did they even have that available? That's amazing.
Yes, it was a signed first edition, first printing of Toni Morrison's Tar Baby. And they gave it to me as a gift. And she passed away a month later.
Oh, so for collecting books like that, because I'm the same way. Like for a while, and I'm sure now that I'm doing another book podcast, like I would get sent, you know this, and being in the book world, like you just get sent arcs. And like even you're speaking of I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, like you're the publisher for that is Source Books, and I love the Source Books team, but like they would send me like 3 copies of an arc, and then I would see you guys in person, and Margaret, who's wonderful, would be like, here's another copy. I'd be like, Margaret, I have like 6 of these now. But like to me, all of my signed copies of books are probably worthless because they're advanced reader copies, but like to me, the ones that mean the most to me are books that like I think the reason I love doing conversations like these is like because I get to have a moment with my buddy here, and then people are gonna like hear it. But for me, like you're super busy. And so like, it's really cool for me to be like, I'm going to grab Kim for an hour and I get to talk to her for an hour. Like, that's why these conversations mean so much to me. And then by extension, the rare times when I get to do them in person, which is so rare now, but like, I remember like the first time I ever interviewed any author was in person. It was Marika Niekamp, and it was for This Is Where It Ends. It was before her first book ever came out. And I remember reading it. It was before I'd ever done an author interview. And I went up to my I think I told you this about I'm Not Dying With You. Like I went up to my director and I was like, I've never done an interview before, but like this whoever this person is, this book is going to be a New York Times bestseller. And like, I don't know why I knew that, but I interviewed them and they wrote, thanks for the wonderful interview. Always choose hope. And like, I kept that in my desk and then it became a New York Times bestseller. And like, that meant so much to me. And then the first time I sat down with you and Gilly, you guys both signed one and you were like, it was, you wrote something about like talking about the Muppets and all these things. And like, so I have that one. And then I interviewed Leigh Bardugo when Crooked Kingdom came out. And it was like right around the same, she had been in Cleveland and like, for some random reason, her publicist was like, this is weird, but do you mind doing the interview like in her hotel room with me? So I'm like hanging out in Leigh Bardugo's hotel room with her agent. And like, then I drove her to this library event that I also like moderated for. It was just like one of those things where like, if I explained to someone like, yeah, I hung out with Leigh Bardugo in her hotel room for like 4 hours, like there's no fun, creepy way to say that except for the true way. But like, she told me while we were talking about at the time she had written a Wonder Woman book that like no one knew about. And she like signed the book to me. She's like, you were the like first person who knew about Wonder Woman or something. And like, so to me, the books that I have that are signed that mean a lot to me, like they're not really worth anything, but like, I remember the moment in time when I met you and Gilly. And like, that's why that book is so important to me. And same thing with like Marika and all these different authors. So like for you to get, I mean, obviously I know why getting Tar Baby is amazing, but like when you collect a book, is it to remember a moment in time? Is it because that particular author meant so much to you? Like, what is it for you when you're collecting books that's like why you do it?
It started as a moment in time, right? Mm-hmm. It started as like, I freaking love, Angie Thomas. So I want, a signed copy of The Hate U Give, you know what I mean? It started as that, but now it has become a little bit of a legacy project for me as something that, because it's funny, like I think about like family heirlooms, right? And like, I watched that trope on TV of the family heirloom that this pearl necklace belonged to my great grandmother. She brought it over and she crossed Ellis Island with it and, that kind of thing. And it's like, I don't have any of that. Like, I don't have anything. My family didn't have anything that we do have one thing that I'm actually about to go to court and fight for. So I'll tell you that because that is something else I plan to collect. But other than this one thing that I just found out about a few years ago that I'm about to go to court and fight for, my family didn't have anything. There weren't any pearls that were passed down or family plates or anything like that. And so I thought about I was at I don't know where I was at. I was at some lecture listening to some great orator that was speaking. And they said that you are your great-great-grandkids' ancestor. Mm-hmm. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was just like, oh my God, I never thought about it that way, that some kid 4 generations from now who will never get to meet me, who will only hear about me in conversation or story, to them, I am going to be at some point someone's ancestor. And so this longing that I had to feel like my family had something, an heirloom, something of value. I'm like, oh my God, I can make it start with me. I can become now that ancestor for some kid 50 years from now, 100 years from now. I got serious about collecting books. And now it is about having something to pass down, having a library of like real value that my great-great-great-grandkid will be able to have in their home and say, my great-great-great-grandmother, Kimberly Latrice Jones, who was an author, loved books, and she left us this amazing collections of signed first editions.
We'll be back with more Passions and Prologues after this break.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I want to tell you about my podcast called Can I Offer You Some Feedback? I'm a business consultant and executive coach with over 20 years experience in change management, leadership development, and naturally providing feedback to high performers. My podcast is for those of you who have a complicated relationship with feedback, whether giving, receiving, avoiding, or seeking. Feedback is essential for our development. In each episode, you'll hear from real people across industries with their ideas, perspectives, and best practices on feedback. I'll also be sharing business bites with you, simple explanations of organizational tools, management techniques, and leadership philosophies that will help you and your businesses thrive. You can listen to Can I Offer You Some Feedback on your favorite podcast app, or learn more at evergreenpodcasts.com.
And now, back to Passions and Prologues. The only example that I have from my family is my father's mother. She had like water on the brain when I was in like when I was like an early teen and even earlier than then. So I don't have a lot of memories of her because she had like dementia for a long time before she passed away. And after she passed, my aunt was like, your Aunt Lily or your Grandma Lily was like a voracious reader. And like, it was obvious that I was like after college. And so I was kind of like a baby version of Adam at that point. She's like, do you want to go through her books? I know that you're like the biggest reader in the family. It's like, absolutely. And I loved Russian literature. I was like a weird college kid who loved Russian literature. Like, I feel like no one should like Russian literature until they're like 72, but I liked it when I was in college. And like, I go in and she has this collection of these super old Dostoevsky's or like Ibsen's plays and like all these different Russian like greats that I didn't know she had. And they're they're literally like library copies that she never returns. So they are not worth anything, but like to me, they're super important. And to like, my, ancestors on the line, like they're going to matter because they were Grandma Lily's from, like the 1940s when she had them. And like, I remember looking, I was like, oh my God, maybe these are like valuable. And then I looked them up and I was like, no, they're like literally the library copies, but even still, like they matter to me. And I know that they'll matter.
Exactly. They'll matter to the next generation. And it's funny, the thing that I'm getting ready to go to court to fight for is found out that one of my cousins lost a family heirloom that we actually had in his divorce. Mm-hmm. That it had been in our family for well over 100 years. It has stayed in our family line for well over 100 years. And when he got divorced, his wife really, really wanted it, which takes it out of the family line for the first time in over a century. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just like, I don't mean to be awful to that woman, but like, I need that back in our family line. Like our family has for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I want to get it back. So apparently, this is some good tea. Apparently, during the Civil War, my family owned a very infamous brothel.
Really?
Yes. My family owned a very infamous brothel during the Civil War, which serviced soldiers, both Confederate and Union soldiers.
Oh my gosh.
And so what we have, and we have the paperwork to authenticate it, is that we still had all the furniture from the brothel.
Oh my God.
Yeah, all the furniture from the brothel, which was the receipts and the paperwork, and they'd been authenticated by people before over the years. Yes, from the Civil War, my family still had the furniture from our brothel, and it had been passed down through the line since the Civil War. And so for the first time 4 years ago, due to a divorce, it left the family line. So now I'm going to court to get it back.
Where does that even, apropos of nothing, where does one even store that?
I got to figure it all out because fingers crossed I'm going to win it back. I don't know if I am, but I'm going to try.
Man, that's crazy interesting. First off, I was gonna ask you what's the strangest thing you have collected or are collecting, but I feel like you're not gonna be able to beat that. But like other than brothel furniture, like what's the craziest thing that Kimberly Jones is collecting?
Man, how do I think brothel furniture might be.
I mean, it has to. There's no no matter what you're about to say to me right now.
Well, I can't think of anything that I have collected yet that is odd, but now I feel challenged to do that because everything else that I'm collecting is like pretty like stereotypical collector things. Like art. I have like some really amazing art. I have an original Panhandle Slim and different artists like that I have. I have an original Hubert Neal and a Frank Morrison and. So I can't think of anything I think that I collect that is odd. I collect family photos. Okay, this is one. Here's one that people would not expect from me. I can tell you that. I collect antique weapons.
You have lived the most interesting life. On you when you were so for people who don't know why the crossover. I also host a podcast for my company that Kim came on a couple weeks ago, and we were going through Kim's like history of her life and the things that she talked about. And so this doesn't surprise me at all, but it might surprise the listeners. But okay, antique weapons. What are we talking about? What do we got?
Antique weapons. You know what? I think I have one here. So this is a pistol. It doesn't even work. I just collected it because it's old. Like this pistol was fashioned.
Oh, it's so tiny.
It's so tiny. Yes, it was fashioned. This is from the early 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
And this was created specifically. It is a Derringer. It is a Derringer Cobra that shoots like 9mm bullets that was created strictly for women.
Yeah, like for example, maybe people working in a brothel. I'm just saying.
Exactly. That's exactly who it was for.
Yeah.
Because it was designed for you to take out someone who was close up on you,
Mm-hmm.
someone who was like attacking you. But they specifically marketed it towards the ladies.
Yeah.
So this is like 100-year-old pistol. It still has, and the craftsmanship on it, it still
beautiful.
has like, the real wood handle and all of that. So I think people would be surprised that I collect antique weapons. And also because I'm so pro gun control.
Yeah.
And but also I collect antique weapons. So, and I have samurai swords. I have stars. I have all this like weird stuff. And how I got into, again, this is something that just happened from enjoyment. I had a really dear friend in LA. I lived in LA for about 5 years when I was trying to break into the film industry. And I had a friend who was a stunt guy, and he and I were obsessed with like martial arts films at the time. And like, we were so goof troopy. We just like thought we lived in like a samurai movie.
Uh-huh.
And he had this epic collection of like samurai swords and stuff like that I was completely enamored with. So he gifted me one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that started that collection. And so it graduated from swords to antique guns. I even have an inactive grenade from the Revolutionary War.
That's amazing.
Yeah. That's one of the that's one of the more like odd things that I collect. I think that would be the most surprising to people.
Yeah.
I think that one would be the most surprising to people. But yeah, like I just, Lord, I have to like, I feel like I have to get like on track of like having a thing, but it's like, I find things and I love them. And then I just start building. Yeah. So I have like different sets of collections. So it's like, I have books and weaponry and art and then random stuff like the collector's card. Ooh, here's another one that I have a huge collection of. And this is the one, and like the Cabbage Patch dolls and all that stuff.
Yeah.
This next thing is the one thing that I know like has zero value.
Uh-huh.
I just like them, and I just like to collect them.
So Kim is holding up. I know there's a specific name for these fans. What are those actually called?
I have no idea.
They're like the fold out fans that you would see like a geisha using.
Yeah, they're like hand fans.
Yeah, and I actually saw you when we first hopped on. You were holding it, and I was like, I think she's got like a specific hand fan right now. It's fantastic.
Yes, and I've learned how to manage them.
Yeah, I mean, the sound is so soothing. It's very delightful. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's fantastic. I love that so much. Do you think this collecting like bleeds into or helps or inspires your writing in any way? Like, do you think there's a connection at all, or is...
Yes, because it's like 8,000 people live in my head at all times.
Uh-huh.
And so these different people live in these different worlds, and these things mean something to them. Like, you know, the girl who has the hand fan is very different from the lady who is obsessed with hip hop.
Yeah.
Very different with the lady who, you know, collects fine art. Mm-hmm. And the childlike girl who, you know, like I can even see their outfits, right? Like the girl who still has the Cabbage Patch doll probably is wearing like glitter sneakers and a tutu and a big bow in her hair. Whereas the girl who collects the MTV Rap cards has like a hoodie and denim jeans and very like high-end sneakers. That's who you need to get on this call next. Either Nick Stone or Angie Thomas, because they are complete sneakerheads, and both of them, their sneaker collection is insane. insane. Like, it's actual like a fun war between the two of them because they try to out-sneaker each other. But I think Nick may be winning the sneaker contest right now because she has some kind of like arrangement or situation with StockX. So she's reached the height of sneakerdom. But yeah, I feel like all of these characters are very different people. You know, the woman who collects fine art enjoys caviar and a in-home manicurist. You know what I mean? They're like all different people. And it's funny because the only other person that I've met that has a really extensive weapon collection and is also someone that you would not expect to have that. Oh my God. As well as I know her name, I can't think of her name right now, but she wrote the Sookie Chronicles.
Charlene Harris.
Charlene Harris. Yes. So I was on a panel with her and she talked about her weapon collection.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, Charlene. First of all, Charlene Harris talked about stuff on that panel that was the best day of my life. All I can say is there was a story told about a stripper in a kiddie pool, and I'll leave it at that.
She is hilarious.
She is so hilarious. Oh my God, I love her so much. I'm so obsessed with her. I only met her that once when I got to do that panel with her, but it was like the best day of my life. But I heard her talk about, or she also has a weapon collection.
Yeah.
She just looks like your sweet, average, middle America Gigi who's like baking cookies, and then she like launched into the story about her weapon collection, and I was like, that's it. I love this woman. I'm gonna marry her.
Well, because she wrote her like most recent series of books. I don't know if she's still writing them. Is about like an Annie Oakley type, like a female cow, like a cowgirl. I'm like, it's like she's like a shooter. I don't remember what it is, but it's almost like a Wild Wild West type of a thing. So I can see that. Yeah. Yeah.
No, she's epic and awesome. So yeah. So now I have to find something really kooky to collect, but I feel like the brothel furniture is going to cover that.
Yeah, I mean, you're good. You have brothel furniture. I think you got the kooky stuff. I'll figure it out. Are you, because you're always doing a million things, are you working on any book stuff that you're allowed to talk about right now?
I am. The biggest project that I'm working on right now is I'm writing my mother's biography.
Yeah.
I'm writing my mom's biography, and I'm so excited about that because, again, you talk about somebody who had a crazy lived experience. Clearly, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. And I think my mother wins. I think between the two of us, in terms of like a wild lived experience, I think my mother wins the contest. My mother, I'll just tell you guys a little bit about her and who she was. My mom, she was super smart. She integrated her high school, and then she went on to, she graduated valedictorian. She graduated 2 years early because she was so smart. Back then, if you were super smart, they didn't know what to do with you. They just skip you a grade.
Send you off, yeah.
And just skip you off to the next grade. And so that happened to her twice, once at elementary school and once in middle school. So she graduated from high school at 16. She graduated 2 years early. And she went on to college. She wanted to be a teacher. And she definitely knew that she was smarter than that. But at that time, we're talking the 1950s, there were definitely African-American women who were doing amazing things, but there was not a whole lot of visuals of that for young girls to grow up with. And so kind of the top tier that you could look at for young girls back then, young Black girls back then, was to be either a teacher or a nurse.
Yeah.
My mom just loved history. And so she decided she wanted to be a history teacher. So she went to Chicago's Teacher College, and then she met this amazing, handsome man from Louisiana with a Louisiana accent that just charmed the pants off of her and my dad. Mm-hmm. And she got married really young. She got married like her freshman year of college, and they immediately became pregnant with my brother. Or I'm now learning as I get older that they maybe became pregnant with my brother first. But her and my dad got married, and so she didn't get a chance to finish college. So after my brother, was like about 6 months old, she needed a job. And my grandmother, who for the record was a minister.
Incredible.
Very important to the story. My grandmother, who was a minister, my mom's mom, had a friend who worked for this man. And so now we're talking like maybe like the early 1960s or whatever. Mm-hmm. My grandma had a friend who worked for this man, and my grandma asked the friend, could she get my mom a job at this place? And my grandma's friend was like, yeah, sure, I'll totally get her an interview and get her a job. It was the Playboy Mansion.
Incredible.
So this is before Hef moves to LA. This is when the Playboy Mansion is in Chicago, the original one. So my mother was one of the original waitresses at the Playboy Mansion, right?
Oh my gosh.
And she hated it because we have to keep in mind, this is at a time where SA is just accepted behavior. I mean, guys are just like patting you on the bottom and at work, and it's par for the course. And so she loathed it, right? She didn't like working there. And so she was on a massive hunt for another job. She wanted to get out of there. She didn't last there long. She wanted to get out of there. And she got hired at Sears because they were headquartered in Chicago. And this is before the Sears Tower. They hadn't even built the Sears Tower yet. She was, so this is when catalogs were really big. And she got a job working in catalogs. And make a long story short, too late. She got a job working at Sears. She integrated her department at Sears. They actually had to have a meeting with the white women in her department to ask them if they would be okay with Black women working there. Okay. And they said yes. And they hired her and 2 other Black women to integrate this department. And she said that her coworkers were fine. They were like, she didn't have any issues or anything like that. But it was her boss, the woman who was over the department, who was like blatantly racist and like awful to her. But my mom just was always a hard worker. And she worked her way up, and eventually they built the Sears Tower. And when they built the Sears Tower, by this time, my mother was like managing departments and doing all this stuff. And they sent her over to the Sears Tower to be the mailroom supervisor. And it's funny because she talks about, I have recordings of her talking about this. She talks about how whenever they would give one of these positions to one of the white women, that it would be a management position, but whenever they would give it to Black women, then it would become a supervisor. Right. Because the supervisor was A, less prestigious, and B, came with less pay, right? Yeah. So she would always get these supervisor positions, but she would be in management, but she would be a supervisor. So they made her the supervisor over the mailroom at the newly built Sears Tower. Speaking of things that collect, she left us, my brother has it. I'm trying to convince him to give it to me. She has one of the original bricks from the original build of the Sears Tower.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so she has a brick from it. And she also had a model that they had made, a bronze model that they had made that they gave to all the supervisors. And so my son has that. He keeps it in his dorm room.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then they had like a something 100th year anniversary book that I have. I have the Sears, like the history of the Sears Tower book. History of the company of Sears book or whatever. So we have all this Sears paraphernalia because of my mom. The efficiency was very slow. And like mail, there's no internet or anything like that. Mail was like the only way that you got information. And so you're talking about, at the time, the tallest office building in the world. So mail might come in on Monday. You might not get it till Friday, but it might have been time sensitive to where you needed to see it like Wednesday. So it was like messing things up, and they didn't want to give her a bigger staff. So my mother works with these engineers who had been doing another project with Sears from this company called Bell and Howell. And they programmed and built robots that could deliver the mail. So they built the robots. My mother programmed it. This is in 1976.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's 1976. They built them. My mother programmed them, these robots that could deliver the mail, original AI work, right? The robots knew which floor they were on, and so they would dump it looks like, if you call it robots, but it looks like a big moving file cabinet, right? Yeah. And they gave them all names, which she has a funny story about that. And these robots, so what would happen was, instead of half of her staff sorting the mail while other half delivered, she didn't have to hire new staff. The entirety of the staff could sort and load the robots and then just send the robots upstairs to deliver the mail.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so the book is called The Robot Lady.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Oh, that's going to be so good. I cannot wait to read that. It sounds amazing. Kim, you're super busy. So I got one last question for you. I ask everybody on their way out, just for like one recommendation. It could be a book. It could be a sandwich shop. It could be a new album. It could be a TV show. But it's just like one recommendation of a thing that you're loving lately that you think more people should know about.
It is the HBO Max series Minx.
I'm hearing everyone talk about how much I love Minx.
I freaking love Minx. Well, can I have two then? One is Minx. I think everybody should go and watch Minx. It's absolutely amazing. And I think that more people should read one of my idols. I think people recognize her as one of the greats, but I think they recognize her after they hear it. If you say her name, then people are like, oh yeah, of course, obviously her. Mm-hmm. But she's not a person who people think of first. And I want people to think of her first more as Zora Neale Hurston.
Yes, I completely agree. That's fantastic. Kim, I've gotten to talk to you a couple of times now the past 2 weeks, which makes some very good weeks. I love you so much. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Passions and Prologues is proud to be an evergreen podcast and was created by Adam Sokol. It was produced by Adam Sokol and Sean Rule Hoffman. And if you are interested in this podcast and any other evergreen podcast, you can go to evergreenpodcast.com to discover all the different stories we have to tell.